вечір. Мене звати Лукас. Я з Аргентини і я regional lead у Viseven. Це мій третій візит з Житомиру. І я вчу українською, але поки що не дуже багато розумію. Дуже приємно бути тут з вами. І сьогодні я буду говорити про how high-performing teams measure success. So, I promise it's going to get better. I've been studying, but it's not easy. So the first thing I want to say before I get started is this topic I'm going to talk about is relying a lot of data, on experience, on surveys in the market, a lot of research. So please raise your hand. I'd like to have a conversation around this topic. It's not set in stone, so there's a lot of people talking about this online in the industry. So happy to listen to your opinions and see how this is gonna go moving forward. A little bit about me. I'm from Argentina, as I said, born and raised, even though right now I'm staying in Poland for the time being. Absolutely passionate about technology. I studied software engineering at the university. I love traveling. I'm a big tennis guy. And in my career, I used to be a software engineer. That was my first role, in which I worked a lot in technologies like Node.js, MongoDB, React. Did some VLC code that hopefully I will never do again. I also did Delphi, which again, I hope I never see again. Then I moved into being a Scrum Master, and the reason for this, and it's actually connected to the focus, I started asking, everything I was coding, everything I'm building, how is this getting to the client? How are they using this? How are they actually touching what we build? So I wanted to get a little bit closer, and the opportunity got with the Scrum Master, so I was kind of half Scrum Master, half DevOps, started to run in deployments, pipelines, and it was very, very connected to measure performance, because it's not just about coding and delivery, but it's also how do we get it from point A to point B? How do we get it from the hands of whomever is developing to the hands of the client? There's a whole journey in between. I also worked a lot in professional services, where we built a brand new team in Latin America, moving that team over from the US back and forth to onboard clients into the software that we were building, and also SaaS solutions. Then also worked as an engineering manager and then engineering director, in which we were working with different teams across the Americas, building them up, scaling them up, outsourcing to clients. And I also worked quite some time at the university in which I studied in Argentina, where I was teaching things like object-oriented programming, document-oriented databases, which I'm a huge fan of personally, and finally CI/CD strategies. And right now, as a regional delivery lead at Viseven, I am working quite closely to our clients, working a lot with our engineering teams to analyze and put together the ideas on how do we convert whatever the client's, the dream of the client into a reality. How do we execute that and deliver on time, on the promise, and on budget as well. So with that said, I think before we even start about talking on the metrics themselves, I think a big point is we have to acknowledge every single team wants to get better. Everyone wants to get better. But in the industry, I think one of the biggest and most common topics has been the maturity model. It's very popular, super common. I even studied in the university many years ago. And the maturity model, the thing with this is it takes you through the different levels, level 1 to level 5, and it's like you win when you get to level 5, right? The problem is, how do we continue evolving once we get to the highest level? Is it like you win? I don't think so. In technology, when we talk about this, you never win. You never reach to the end. It's like a continuous learning, continuous experience. And see, now we're talking about AI. Like 2 years ago, nobody was talking about this. So how can you suggest that you reach the point where you are the best and you can relax? So it's not a thing. The people under the research of what I'm going to be talking about came up with the concept of the capability model. The capability model is like an evolution of the maturity model, and it takes you to understand in multiple dimensions. How can you continuously get there? How can you reach to the point in which you say, I am never going to be the best at this because there's always going to be more that I have to study, that I have to do. And the biggest thing is the capability model never applies to one individual, but it applies to the team, a group of people, even an entire company. And it constantly is fostering like performance results as a group and innovation. So the thing about this, when we talk about a capability model, is we have different pillars. 4 to be very practical. The first one is technical proficiency. We all want to be very, very highly technical proficient, especially when it comes down to things that were many years ago not so common, but very robust version control, which was the first thing that they brought up. Now I think we all do it. It's quite common, but 15 years ago it wasn't the case. Automated deployments, and for that connected with automated testing as well. And this is just an example. Trunk-based development is something that it's just a branching strategy, but that connects a lot to CI/CD strategies, to how do we enable automation in the overall process. And everything is connected one to another. We'll talk a bit more about that in the next few slides. Then we have process efficiency, in which, and I really like this topic because the first one says working in small batches. Working in small batches is huge from the point in which, first of all, we think in the smallest possible way. It could be just working on the most small user story, small ticket that we want to deliver within a sprint. But think of it further. Think of it even in releases. One of the things that kill the productivity of the team are these huge, humongous releases every year that many teams are still doing. And how much time do we spend in the releases? I don't know. People spend whole 9 days releasing because it breaks. They have to roll back. They have to go again. So small batches, even for a release, is highly important. I'm going to talk a bit more about work in progress limits or WIP limits, as a lot of people mention about. Then proactive monitoring. This is huge, as we always want to think about. We need to be the first ones to know that there's an issue with whatever we're building, not the client. We need to be the ones that know the reset password button doesn't work. I'm not even saying that the whole server went down. Like small things everything has to be monitored in the way that we should not have surprises. And of course, saying this, it's much easier than doing it. So this is on the theory. We'll talk about how do we even get there. And finally, and I have some slides at the end, in cultural excellence, there has been a proven connection between high-performing teams and cultural excellence, because without it, you cannot get to a full-fledged solution on any of the others. So, moving on, the first thing is, what is success to a team? How do we define it? And we talk so much about what is success to a project, what is success to what we've done with the client, but what is success to us internally and the team, which will enable what we're doing with the clients later. Well, before many years ago, we were talking about being super busy, very busy all the time was a good thing. More code, even better. The more code you write, the better you are, or the better engineer you become. We'll talk about that. In new definitions in the surveys and the research that has been done, it talks about speed, stability, learnings, and finally user impact, which is a huge thing. But the thing is, you need to have them all if you want to become that high-performing team. You cannot get speed without stability, because the only thing you're doing is crashing against the wall at the speed of light, probably. So it's no one thing without the other. Now, I think we all talked about in the past, as we are all in the industry, about utilization rates, which sometimes we're like, well, if everyone is 100% utilized, is that a thing to celebrate? Or are we just creating a queue of work because we cannot pick up more? Of course, the mix of the metrics with the context is very useful, but the metric itself, living by itself, could bring some questions of, it's not providing flow to, on one end, make more work, on the other end, get better. Because if we're just running behind getting things finished, we're never spending it or investing a little time in getting ourselves better or getting to the next level. Finally, velocity, how many story points did we finish? That's a metric that in some ways can be very confusing because it applies to just a team, and then a team that sits next to us. It's a different way to analyze story points, to measure the complexity. Same thing with the lines of code, as I mentioned, and on-time delivery, which is personally a metric that I love, but it's very useful with context. Because if you don't provide the context on this one, a lot of people start cutting corners because we just want to get the metric in place instead of just actually getting what we promised on time. Those are two different metrics. So here's where I want to just introduce what's called the DORA metrics. DORA is a research program that started more than 15 years ago, I believe. And a group of these researchers came back with a set of metrics which initially were 4, and just a few years ago they added the last one. The first one is deployment frequency. And this is, by the way, how they measure or how they say a team is part of the elite, the high performance groups. So deployment frequency is how often do we go to production? It's pretty simple. Lead time for changes is how much time does it take? And I would like everyone to start thinking on the back of their mind on their teams, how is this reflecting on your end? How much time does it take from going from code committed to production? Not saying development stage or staging, all the way to production. Change failure rates, how many times does a deployment create a bug? Time to restore services, once it goes down, how much time does it take to go up? And finally, deployment rework rate, which is quite an interesting metric in terms of how many hot fixes do we have by the end of the day? We are deploying and deploying, but how many times do we have to deploy again? Because whatever we deployed had something that wasn't what we expected. So let's deep dive a little bit on the 5 metrics. The first one, deployment frequency. When we talk about elite teams, high-performing teams in the industry, the surveys show that elite teams can deploy whenever they want, on demand, as many times as they want, because there's no downtime. There is no communication needed in many times. Of course, this is a business decision in many cases. But the system allows continuous deployment over and over. The second one being lead time for changes. How much time does it take for elite teams? Under an hour, from code that has been committed to code that goes into production. Imagine how many things need to happen for us to be in this position. You need to have full testing automation. Your pipeline needs to be flawless. The deployment needs to be perfect. No downtime whatsoever. So many things. It's impressive that some teams actually get to this in a daily, recurrent basis, fully automated. Even the code reviews, everything is included in this time. Then looking at change failure rate, elite teams are under 15%. Then time to restore services, high performance teams, they're looking at under an hour to get the services up and running. We will compare to what low performing teams look like. And finally, rework rate after a deployment happens. Elite teams are between a 0 to a 2%. While some low-performing teams go all the way up to 64%. And imagine that 64% of the times you went to production, you have to fix something. And this is where we talk about on-time delivery and velocity being metrics that are a bit confusing. Because velocity, yeah, I can do 1,000 story points per sprint. But if the next sprint I get another 1,000 just of bugs, doesn't mean much. If every time I go to production, I didn't manage to fully test, so I have to go again and, but I can say my deployment was on time, but it just broke everything. So this is why I say context and the metrics is very, very, very important. Now, before I even show the results from the surveys that were performed on the DORA research, actually from last year. This is very, very recent, but changed a lot over the years. Lead time for changes. And I want to ask the people here, the development teams, how much time does it take for your teams to commit code until it goes all the way to production?
Oh my God, really tough question. So I would find either team to answer that because I want to know that. Victor, from commit to production, how many time?
I don't know.
Oh my God, this is a bad answer, Roma, just for your attention. I believe this is at least several days as we need to go through stage, UAT, environment testing, so at least several days.
Okay, that's a very good answer. So the question that was asked during this research was exactly this. What is the lead time for changes? How much time does it take from code committed to code that goes into production? The least performing teams, so the teams that takes more than 6 months from code committed to code that goes into production, just at 2%. So this is good actually. It should be 0, but okay. Between 1 month and 6 months, we're looking at 13.2% of the teams in the industry have this time. Now, if you look at the normal rate, so between 1 week and 1 month, almost 30%, and another 30% between 1 day and 1 week. This is where clearly the average is. And then less than 1 day, 15% of the teams in the industry are going there, and less than 10% can deploy all the way to production within the hour. If you look at the trends from previous years, this actually got much higher, because I believe the first time they released this in 2014, it was around 5 or 4%. So we're getting better. AI is in the mix. It's helping us do things faster, more secure, more reliable. But still, this is where most of us are, between 1 week and 1 month, or between 1 day and 1 week, which is not bad. But also just points us on where do we want to get if we want to be like the top performance, the elite of the industry. Then, same thing with deployment frequency. How often do you guys go to production? I think that's my curiosity question now. In your teams, how often do you deploy to production?
So who wants to answer that? He wants, okay. Hello, what is your name?
The name is Nikita. We go to production every week.
Every week, Lucas.
Nice.
Right? Okay, I'm curious also about research. How often do we go to production? Yura, how often?
3 times
Per what?
per week.
Okay, 3 times per week, Lucas. Is it good?
That's good.
That's good.
Yes.
All right.
That's very good. So let's see what the industry shows. Fewer than once per 6 months, 3.6% of the teams deploy every 6 months. I have been on one of those teams. My very first team was within that 3.6%. And believe me, we spent 3 days deployment once. I don't know, we just slept in the office. It's not great. It's like this terrible. Nobody wants to be there. Then between once per month and once every 6 months, there is a lot. 20% of the industry is deploying between 1 per month and every 6 months. Between once a week and once a month, we have a 30%, over a 20% between once a day and once a week, which is where we're lying based on the responses we've got. This is very good. And between once an hour and once a day, we're only looking at 6.5%. But how hard is this? How do you get to this? Well, this is where the capability model comes in. And we'll have a slide to talk about how do we make all these metrics, because the data is beautiful and everything, but how do we go from just the information to actually doing something about it? And finally, on demand, surprisingly, we go all the way up to 16.2% of teams can deploy on demand. My personal take here is that this 16%, there are a lot of new products, new companies, very small products that can actually do this. Because enterprise products, It's not like you could just click a button on everything. Like it takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of time, especially with products that have been built over time, include multiple technologies in the stack. It's not so easy. But this is what we have in terms of what has been shown. I'm not going to go through every single metric. This is going to take a long time, but I think this paints a picture of what is the spread and how is this different in many ways for many different teams that are actually aiming for the same. Now, the great division, the biggest division, elite versus low performing teams. What is going on? What actually gives you in real life to be a part of the high performing teams, to be a part of that low percentage? Well, deployment frequency, elite performance. These teams deploy 973 times faster than a low performing team. The numbers are incredibly high. If we look at lead time and time to restore, which by the way, you might find it, if you read about it as MTTR, this is how the abbreviation that the industry uses, it's about the same number, 6,570 times faster that you get to, get to fix your system and also to deploy. If we take this into a real statement, like into reality, the difference between a low performance team and a high performance team is I get to commit my code as a developer and it goes to the client today, or it gets to the client in 6 months. Imagine this scenario. I'm a developer, I finish my user story, it goes to some branch, I never see it again. 6 months from now, I get a call from the DevOps engineer deploying, he says, hey, your code is working, it doesn't work. It's all broken. Does anybody remember what they coded 6 months ago? We have to go back, we have to study what we wrote, we have to blame ourselves, like how did they did this? Well, maybe you're not even in the same role. It's problematic wherever you see it. So I think as I mentioned before, there is a rule of we're not trading off quality for speed or speed for quality. What this actually means is we need both. We need quality and we need speed if we want to be part of the high-performing teams. Otherwise, the stability is just not going to be a thing. And if you don't have it, then it just affects every single piece in the equation. Then I think I spoke a little bit about stability as a catalyst, which is just the strength that we're given or the motivation that we're finding. Because if we're stable and we're moving towards the right solution and the right decisions, it doesn't just affect how good we can do the job, how efficient we are. It's also the fact of we're not going to have drills overnight or on the weekend, like the deployment failed, the client is upset because something doesn't work. So it's all connected to this. The statistic has been captured based on the DORA research, which they publish every year. I can share the link. It's like a sort of a magazine that they come up with once every year with the research based on surveys that they run in the industry, multiple teams in multiple countries and regions. And they've been doing this for 15 years. And it's been evolving. And the latest one actually shows how AI has impacted all of this and how this has made teams more and more productive as well. So it is quite an extensive document, but very interesting. I'm going to dive into the final piece of the presentation, which is the cultural and behavioral drivers of the high-performing teams. Because the metrics are wonderful, gives us a lot, but how is this connected to a team itself? Well, the first one is psychological safety. This is a concept that the same people that were part of the DORA metrics came up with a few books. One of these books is the Unicorn Project. In the Unicorn Project, they talk about a few concepts, one of those being psychological safety. Imagine you are in a situation where you are project manager or a developer or QA. You're a developer, you introduced a bug, or you're a QA, you didn't test it appropriately, or you didn't communicate the right thing to the client. How many times do we feel confident raising the hand and saying, I made a mistake, I need help, I need to fix this? Because this is this culture of psychological safety that drives the teams to get better and better. Then we of course have flow and development experience. how many times do we talk about the user experience? Everyone knows about it. It's very popular. But who mentioned developer experience? If we have developer experience, this means we are enabling the developers to give feedback, to spend time in quality work, in actually getting things done and finalized without distractions. And if we consider this feedback from the development team, which are the closest ones to what's going on, then a lot of magic starts happening. Because I am very sure that most of us who are or have been developers, we've been in a situation where we code something, but we never know how the client uses it, if they use it at all, in many situations. So if I get this feedback loop as a developer, there's a lot I can give to the product as well. Then we have continuous learning, which we talked about already. And finally, systems thinking, which is pretty much just making sure we are thinking not about the individual person, but as a team. Because when we think of the metrics, when we think of the high-performing team, it's about winning as a team, failing as a team, improving as a team. And this is where the capability model comes in, because the capability model being a live document is how, as an engineering manager in the past, in my case, I was able to measure that we were actually getting better. Because we would start in the point A of the capability model and start rising and rising. And that's when I can say, well, after 3 months of efforts, we actually got better. And these are the results. We have automated pipelines that will enable X amount of deployment frequency improvements, or less bugs, or less rework. This brings you actual data that you can work with and can make business decisions based off. Then I think we're all familiar with this, just the anti-patterns that kill performance. First of all, the hero culture, pretty popular. The hero culture is just depending on one person to fix everything. This is very hard. I think we've all been there. It's not easy to fight sometimes because it happens, but we need to share and make sure that the knowledge is spread across the team, so there's no one single dependency, because this person can get sick, can get tired, whatever the reason be, but dependency on one single hero is never the greatest. Then I mentioned the Big Bang releases, like releasing once every 6 months, once every year. I have been there. I've been in a team that we released once every 6 months. It's terrible. Like, nothing works. You don't know how to fix it. You start calling 100 people on a Teams call. It's never the best thing. Then the blame culture is, I think we all know about this. Nothing we want to have. We want to be able that our teams can raise their hand and say, look, I made a mistake. I need help. I need to fix this. Let's make it happen. And we're going to focus on getting better, fixing, improving. I'm sure it's not going to happen again. Instead of just spending the time into the analysis on why this happened and who is to blame. And finally, removing the manual gates. The more manual steps we have, the more bottlenecks we get, and the harder it gets to move through different stages. Now, to wrap this up, I'm going to talk a bit about how can we make this happen? How can people leverage what I was saying into a reality? My recommendation is the first one: identify where does it hurt. Sit down with your team, have a retrospective, and say, what is that moment of the day in which I go through and I say, I don't like this. I don't want to do this. That's where we improve. That's the first point we have to work on. Identify those points. Then once you have all the points identified, focus on the capabilities. But don't come with 75 action items, because no one's going to get done. Focus on one or two. Even if it's a retrospective, keep that. Make a vote within the team. This is what we think is the core thing. I swear, a week, 2 weeks, a month is going to go by. We are all going to come back to that as a team. And we're going to say, we only have 2 things to track. How are we forgetting about this? It cannot happen. But if we have 75, it's like, whatever. It's just too much. I'm too busy. I have too much going on. So this applies to a whole capability model, to just a simple sprint retrospective. Finally, find the North Star. As I mentioned, and this connects to the last point, the North Star and building your own model. When I say model, I mean a capability model. So the North Star can be the metrics themselves, which is what's giving you information, what's giving you input, is giving you data. And finally, build your own capability model. You can go online and you're gonna get examples on how it goes through stages. I'm more than happy to share examples that I've done in the past. But this, you can build it with your teams. You can track towards it. If you start at the very bottom of the capability model because you're not there, then so be it. You have so much to grow. It's like it's gonna be exponential growth in very short time, and this is gonna be an actual live document that we can work with instead of just a feeling. Yeah, I feel we're doing better because the last 3 sprints were nice, but it's not backed up with data. And if we want to scale up a team, or if we want to improve or invest in something else, well, we can go back and say, well, based on what we've been doing, we saved up X amount of time in deployments in bug fixing. Our actual velocity and throughput is with features instead of just random story points, which could be bugs, which could be features, and a mix of things. So with that said, I'm gonna open this up for questions. And thank you very much. Muchas gracias.